Now you go. My power shall be absolute.
Here we be. This is the Amethyst combo, aka the combo that almost made me cry. Like, there's a copy pasta that me and my friends keep using. We have a DMC Discord server, and when I was attempting this combo, I was having full-on mental breakdowns. Because usually when I try to make a combo, it takes me a day, a few hours, 8 hours, even if need be 18 hours, but I will do it within a day. Usually. Not always, but usually. This is a combo that took me multiple days, and every day I would end up with, like, one almost perfect attempt, and it would just fail at the very end. It's like the heavens, like, it's like the universe itself was just not allowing me. It was not allowing me to do this combo correctly. It just, I was close to giving up, but I was so mad because I knew that it was possible. You know, when I try a combo, when I try multiple setups, if I try these individual setups, and I know I can do them at least once, that proves that the combo is possible. So all I gotta do is merge these setups that I've confirmed to be possible, and then I can move on with the combo and actually try to do it. And it's especially aggravating when you come close, you get to the very end of the combo, and it fails. You cannot give up when you know something is possible, and then something happens, and okay, I'll stop yapping, alright? This is a combo that consists of 4 setups. 3 of those setups being Doppelganger setups. The first setup of this combo is from Blank. Now, Blank is a very popular Japanese DMC player. He was actually one of the first players I was introduced to when I started playing the game, and he was also one of the first people to make a Vergil combo video shortly after Vergil came out. At least, that's how I remember it. So, the first setup is by Blank. The second setup is a setup you're all too familiar with, if you follow me. This is a setup that I used in the Eclipse combo, but instead of the Doppelganger using Yamato combo C, in this version, he uses Yamato combo A. Now, this setup is by V Gaming. V Gaming used this setup. However, he got this setup from Bode, or well, Z2, the guy that made the Meltdown combo video. And Bode got this setup from Edwin Zhu, who made that famous Doppelganger video with Vergil, right? So the original creator of this setup is Edwin Zhu, and it's like, it's everybody's setup. It's our setup. So many people have made modifications to this setup. Like, V Gaming made it so that, you know, Vergil catches the enemy with Void Slash. And I made it so that instead of Yamato combo C, the Doppelganger uses Yamato combo A. Which should, in theory, make it more, like, it should make it simpler. But because, you know, Yamato combo A is just mashing without making any pause, but in a way it actually makes it more difficult because in this combo you have moments where you gotta stop and think, and if you make a pause instead of mashing, instead of being incredibly quick, it can cost you the combo. So this setup is by everyone. V Gaming, Bode, Edwin Zhu, whatever. Me. Okay, the third setup is by Byanyon Akuma. I don't think he needs any introduction. He is one of the best Vergil players, period. And this is from one of his newer combos that he did on the Cerberus stage. I just wanted an excuse to use Rising Dragon, and, you know, this was perfect. And the final setup is also by the man himself, Byanyon Akuma. It is a setup that he's used in so many combos. He's used it in multiple combos with different finishers, like the Try Me Taunt, and I was like, I absolutely have to replicate this, because I really like it. And this is, you guessed it, the reason for my anguish, for my agony, for... This is what makes this combo so incredibly difficult. It is literally what encumbers everything, this last setup. But that isn't to say that all these other setups are easy, alright? Especially when you have to merge them, like fuse them into one combo. Alright, so without further ado, let's start the analysis. Now, before I actually start talking about, well, the analysis, let's get a few things out of the way. So, you guys know that Rising Star consists of 2 hits. The first slash launches the enemy slightly into the air. The second slash launches the enemy even higher into the air. So what you want to do with this combo is, you only want Vergil, you want him to only use the first slash of Rising Star to slightly launch the enemy into the air, and then you want to cancel it. You want to cancel Rising Star with Air Trick, right? Alright, and you guys already know that Starfall is just pressing the attack button once in the air with Beowulf, but if you're in Sin DT and you press and hold the attack button with Beowulf equipped in the air, you will use a different kind of Starfall, which is exclusive to your Sin double trigger. So if you press and hold the attack button, Vergil will use this double Starfall with this reverse second kick, like a zigzag. So this is something that you gotta know. It's pretty basic, but I'm just getting it out of the way. Alright, so basically, you want to have the Yamato equipped and you use Rising Star. But like I said, immediately after launching the enemy into the air with the first slash of Rising Star, you use Air Trick to cancel the entire move. Now, you switch to Beowulf, and you use that Sin DT Starfall. So you press and hold the attack button. Vergil now use this double Starfall. At this point, you switch to the Mirage Edge, and you use Helmbreaker, which is just pressing the attack button once. And now you wait a little, this is very important, and you use Million Stab. Now, while using Million Stab, you switch to the Yamato, and you use a Void Slash to catch the enemy and suspend them in the air. At this point, you use Trig Down to gain some distance away from the enemy. And that is the end of the first setup, right? Okay, so, second setup, or well, the first actual setup. So, you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, the one who is in sync with you and mimics all your commands immediately. However, as is the case with literally every combo ever, you want to summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, and before he's fully formed, you use Rising Star. So if you wait for the Doppelganger to fully form before using Rising Star, the Doppelganger will use Rising Star with you, because he copies your inputs, he reacts to what you do, and you don't want that, which is why you want to cancel, you want to basically use Rising Star before the Doppelganger is fully formed, so that he can stay there. So, you use Rising Star, and now, before doing the second slash of Rising Star, you start mashing the attack button. You press the attack button 1, 2 times, and then 2 more times. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, basically. Now, let me explain. What happens here, essentially, is while using Rising Star, you press the attack button twice, and then after Rising Star, you press the attack button 2 more times. This will cause Vergil to use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave with the Yamato, because when you're in midair with the Yamato and you press the attack button twice, Vergil does the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave, basically. But you have to mash beforehand. So you gotta mash before these 2 hits. At least press the attack button at least 2 to 3 times. And now, you switch to the Mirage Edge, and you use Helmbreaker, which is just pressing the attack button once. But you immediately jump cancel this Helmbreaker by using enemy step, so you press the attack button to use Helmbreaker, and you jump, and now you use Air Stinger, which is right plus attack button, alright? And while using Air Stinger, which is right plus attack button, you keep mashing the attack button like a maniac, alright? Now, you let go of the lock-on, you switch to Beowulf, and you start holding right. All the while, like, during this whole thing, you just mash the attack button. You never stop mashing. Now you switch to Beowulf, you keep holding right, and you use Starfall. And while using Starfall, you don't stop mashing the attack button, alright? So, again, let's go over this again. So, Rising Star, just as you're about to finish Rising Star, you press the attack button 2 to 3 times. Now you press it 2 more times, and Vergil will use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave. You immediately switch to Mirage Edge, use Helmbreaker, and then you jump cancel Helmbreaker. You basically press the attack button and jump, and then you use Air Stinger, which is right plus attack button, but you keep mashing the attack button. Throughout this whole thing and the remainder of the setup, you keep mashing the attack button. Now you let go of the lock-on, you press and hold right, you switch to Beowulf, and you use Starfall. All this time, throughout all this, you keep mashing the attack button. After hitting the ground with Starfall, like you keep mashing, you switch to the Yamato, and you use Void Slash. So what's going to happen is the Doppelganger will react to you mashing like a maniac, and he will use Cindy to Yamato combo A, and he will blow the enemy away towards Vergil, and Vergil will now catch the enemy. He will keep them suspended in midair with Void Slash. Alright, so Yamato combo A, or well, Cindy to Yamato combo A, as you guys already know, is just mashing the attack button like a maniac. And the Doppelganger reacts to all your commands, so you are essentially mashing like a maniac. You mash during Rising Star, you mash after Rising Star, during Air Stinger, during Starfall, you keep mashing like a maniac. It is very important. If you make a pause, right? If you take too long, if you make a very long pause, the Doppelganger might end up using Yamato combo C instead, or he might end up resetting the combo. A lot of things can happen, so timing is key. You really gotta have perfect timing here. I'm making it sound more difficult than it actually is, but you get the point. So you mash like a maniac, essentially. Now you might be wondering, why do you have to let go of the lock-on and press and hold right while using Starfall? It's very simple. If you don't let go of the lock-on, and if you don't press and hold right, Vergil will use a normal Starfall and he will face the enemy. You don't want that. You want Vergil to face away from the enemy. You want him to go right so that he can gain distance away from the enemy. This is very important. So this is essentially how this setup works, and that's about it. So after catching the enemy with Void Slash, you immediately deactivate the Doppelganger, alright? And now you wait for Vergil to finish sheathing his sword, and that is the end of this first Doppelganger setup. After Vergil is done with Void Slash, you obviously just use Rising Star, and now that you're in the air, you once again summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, alright? After the Doppelganger has been fully formed, you let go of the lock-on, and you use Trick Up to gain some altitude. You know, you want to propel yourself into the air. And now let me explain a few things about this setup. Now, this setup is very reminiscent of the Wreckage / Tenebrous / Urban / Celestial combo setup. So I gotta explain how Aerial Rave B works, alright? So Aerial Rave B, or Aerial Rave 2, whatever you want to call it, is attack button, pause, alright? So when you press the attack button twice, Vergil will use the first 2 hits with the Yamato in the air. So he will use 2 slashes. Now you make a pause, and you press the attack button one more time, and Vergil will use this roulette spin. This is only 1 hit, alright? Even though it's multiple hits, it's only 1 press of the attack button. Okay? And after this roulette spin, you press the attack button 1 more time, so Vergil can use the final hit of Aerial Rave B, which pins the enemy to the ground. Of course, you could always just mash like a maniac after the pause, and it's going to have the same effect. But with this combo, you got to do it like this, and let me explain why. So, after using Trick Up, you switch to the Mirage Edge, and you use Air Stinger. Air Stinger, when you're on the right side, in midair with the Mirage Edge, is the left plus attack button, but you want to press left, and then you want to press the attack button 2 times. So you don't press the left plus attack button, you press the left plus attack button plus attack button. Why is that? It's so that the Doppelganger can react to you pressing the attack button twice and use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. This is why pressing the attack button once is not enough. You gotta press the attack button twice, or even thrice, it doesn't matter. So, immediately after using Trick Up, switch to the Mirage Edge, left, and you press the attack button twice or thrice. This will cause Vergil to use Air Stinger, and the Doppelganger to use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. At this point, you make a pause, because Aerial Rave B requires a pause. You switch to Beowulf, and you use Starfall, which is only 1 press of the attack button. This will cause Vergil to use Starfall, obviously, and the Doppelganger to use the Roulette Spin, which is the 3rd hit of Aerial Rave B. Now, before you touch the ground with Starfall, you use Trig Down to descend to the ground. You want to teleport to the ground. This is key. At this point, you use Rising Dragon, which is left plus holding the attack button. And you pressing and holding the attack button will cause the Doppelganger to use the final hit of Aerial Rave B to pin the enemy to the ground. At this point, when the enemy is close to you, when he's about to fall to the ground, you stop holding the attack button, you release Rising Dragon, and you deactivate the Doppelganger, and you launch the enemy into the air. After this, you use Trig Down once again to teleport to the ground, you switch to the Yamato, and you use Void Slash to catch the enemy. Now you use Trig Down, and now you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger. This is the end of this 3rd setup, or the 2nd Doppelganger setup. That's basically it. I hope you guys understand. So basically, while using Air Stinger, you press the attack button twice. This causes the Doppelganger to use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. Then you make a pause, which is required for Aerial Rave B. You don't want to mash like a maniac, because then the Doppelganger will use Aerial Rave 1. Now you make a pause, and you switch to Beowulf, and you press the attack button 1 more time to use Starfall. The Doppelganger reacts to that, and he uses the Roulette Spin, which is the 3rd hit of Aerial Rave B. Don't forget, you gotta cancel Starfall by using Trig Down, so you teleport to the ground before you actually hit the ground with Starfall. This is very important. And now, when you use Rising Dragon, you press the attack button 1 more time, the Doppelganger reacts to that, and he uses the final hit of Aerial Rave B to pin the enemy to the ground. And that's it. This is actually probably the easiest setup in the combo, not counting the first one, which isn't really a Doppelganger setup. That doesn't really count. That's kind of filler, in a way. I just wanted an excuse to use that Cindy T Starfall. Alright, so now we have the third Doppelganger setup. So the final setup of this combo. And just like with the previous setup, like the first Doppelganger setup, again, like I said, you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, and before he's fully formed, right? Like before he's fully formed, you immediately use Rising Star. Right? Just like before, you don't wait. If you wait, the Doppelganger will use Rising Star with you, and you don't want that. Alright. So, before I start talking about this setup, I gotta tell you something. There are 2 ways to do this combo, or 2 ways to do this setup. There's an easy way, and there's a hard way. And in typical peculiar fashion, I only discovered the easy way well after I was done with the combo. And I didn't realize just how much easier my life would have been if I discovered this setup earlier, this method earlier. Okay, so I will explain both methods, alright? But first, let me explain a little something about Vergil's taunts. What I'm about to say applies to most of my newer combos, so basically, you know how Vergil has an air taunt, right? Like, he throws these 3 mini summon swords at the enemy, and they launch the enemy into the air, essentially. Yeah, so that's his default air taunt. So when you press the taunt button in the air, that's what he'll do. However, this only works if your style rank is below S. So if it's A, B, C, or D, or no rank, you will get this air taunt. However, if your style ranking is S, or double S, or triple S, instead of this air taunt, where he throws these miniature summon swords, he will do this. So this DMC3 Air Rave, essentially. But this only works if your style ranking is S or higher, right? So double S, triple S. And it only works if you have the Yamato equipped or if you have the Mirage Edge equipped. So even if your style ranking is S or higher, if you have Beowulf equipped, you will be able to use the normal air taunt with the summon swords. So if you want to use the S rank air taunt in your combo, which is the case with, you know, like the Amethyst combo, the Nocturnal combo, the Rose combo, all these combos. So if you want to use the S rank air taunt, what I recommend for this combo, before you even start this combo, go, like, if you have SS Sion's Collaborative Trainer, which I assume that if you're watching this video and if you're trying DMC combos, you have this trainer, go into Taunt Selector, go to Vergil, and replace both his air taunt and his S rank air taunt with Yamato Air Rave. Right? That's what you want. This will make it so that even if your style ranking is not S, you can use this air taunt, like, you know, the S rank air taunt. Also, you know how even if your style ranking is S, if you have Beowulf equipped, Vergil will use the normal air taunt, you know, with the summon swords. Well, this facilitates things, right? Because if you go into Taunt Selector, you can use the S rank air taunt even with Beowulf equipped, which is what I did in both the Rose combo and the Nocturnal combo. And the Amethyst combo, actually. So in all of these combos, I am using the S rank air taunt, even though I have Beowulf equipped, which shouldn't be possible. You could even say that this is kind of like cheating, but it facilitates things, because this way, you don't have to switch to the Mirage Edge or the Yamato just so you could use this one taunt, right? It definitely facilitates things, and that's what I recommend using. Another option, and I didn't even know this was a thing up until recently, is you have the option to enable always S rank air taunts. So this will make it so that you always have this S rank air taunt available. However, if you have Beowulf equipped, you're gonna have the normal air taunt. But this facilitates things. My go-to method is to use the taunt selector and replace both the air taunt and the S rank air taunt with Yamato Air Rave. So as you already know, when Vergil is using a taunt, doesn't matter if it's a ground taunt or an air taunt, he does not react to melee commands, right? This was especially useful in the Wreckage combo, where essentially Vergil uses the air taunt, and while using the air taunt, I mash the attack button so that the Doppelganger can finish using Aerial Rave B, but Vergil doesn't react to that because he's too busy using the air taunt. So essentially, while taunting, Vergil does not react to melee commands, but his Doppelganger does. Alright? And this is very important for this combo if you want to do it the hard way. Okay? So, let me explain what happens here. What you want to do now, essentially, is the following. Okay? Pay very close attention. So you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, and before the Doppelganger is fully formed, you use Rising Star. But before you use Rising Star, you gotta use the Stormblades. Now, when you're on the left side, using Stormblades is left plus holding the Mirage Blade button. And Stormblades is a move that causes these Mirage Blades to surround the enemy, and then when you release the Mirage Blade button, they launch the enemy into the air. But what you want to do for this setup, for this combo, is once you press left and you hold the Mirage Blade button, which in my case is the right mouse button, you don't let go of the Mirage Blade button until the very end of the combo. Alright, this is incredibly important. So during this entire setup, you do not let your finger off this Mirage Blade button. For me, that's the right mouse button. I don't know what it is for you, but this is very important. So you want to keep holding it. Alright? So, anyway, let's pretend that this is not the case. Alright, so just focus on what I'm about to say now. So, you use Rising Star, and while using Rising Star, you switch to Beowulf while using it, okay? And now that you're done with Rising Star, you release the lock-on, so you let go of the lock-on, and you use Starfall, but you press the attack button like 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you press the Trick button to use Trick Up very fast. You lock on again. This is very important. You switch to the Yamato, and you use the S-Rank AIR TAUNT. And during this S-Rank AIR TAUNT, you mash like a maniac, alright? Now, you press the attack button twice, this is part of your mashing, and Vergil will use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. Now you make a slight pause, and you just continue mashing like a maniac. This will cause Vergil to use the remainder of Aerial Rave B, and he will pin the enemy to the ground, but not before the Doppelganger is done with Yamato Combo A. And what will happen essentially is he will catch the enemy with the final hit of Yamato Combo A, and he will blow them away, very far away. At this point, you use Trig down to teleport to the ground, and you finally let go of the Mirage Blade button. This will cause the Storm Blades to launch the enemy into the air, and at this point you use Judgment Cut End. And you also throw 1 Mirage Blade at the enemy to prevent them from falling to the ground. And that is the end of this setup. Now, I know that's a lot to take in, and it is, so let me explain why this is so difficult. First of all, let's start with the mashing. Why do you have to mash like a maniac while using Starfall? It's very simple. It's because you want the Doppelganger, once again, just like with the first Doppelganger setup, you want the Doppelganger to use Sin DT Yamato Combo A. Sin DT Yamato Combo A is mashing the attack button like a maniac without making any pauses, right? So naturally, this means that you gotta mash like a maniac. So, you use Starfall and you mash the attack button like 4 times. This will cause the Doppelganger to use the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo A. And now you use the AIR TAUNT, right? And during this AIR TAUNT, Vergil doesn't react to melee commands, but the Doppelganger does. So you keep mashing during the AIR TAUNT. And then, when you switch to the Yamato, you essentially just use Aerial Rave B yourself. And you can make that a pause because at this point it doesn't matter, the Doppelganger is already going to be done with Yamato Combo A. So all of this, you mashing during the AIR TAUNT, all of it is so that the Doppelganger can use Yamato Combo A. But there are other things to consider, such as, why use the AIR TAUNT in the first place? It's very simple. So like I said, Yamato Combo A is mashing the attack button like a maniac without making any pause. But Yamato Combo C is, you press the attack button about 4 times, and after the 4th hit with the Yamato, you need to make a pause. After this pause, you resume mashing, and Vergil does this slash flurry, right? Now, the first 4 hits of Yamato Combo A and Yamato Combo C are identical. The only difference between Yamato Combo A and Yamato Combo C is that during Yamato Combo A, you just mash like a maniac. But Yamato Combo C, after the 4th hit, you need to make a pause, right? This is very important. So, if you want to do it this way without using any AIR TAUNT, this is what happens. So you use Rising Star, And now you switch to Beowulf, and when you use Starfall, you press the attack button 2 times. Now use Trick Up, you switch to the Yamato, and you press the attack button 2 more times to use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. And of course, now you need to make a pause because Aerial Rave B requires a pause after the second slash. So this is mandatory, right? So what exactly happens here? You press the attack button twice during Starfall. The Doppelganger does the first 2 hits of Yamato combo A/C. Because like I said, the first 4 hits are the same for Yamato combo A and C. So you press the attack button twice during Starfall. The Doppelganger does the first 2 hits of the Yamato combo. Then you use Trick Up, and you switch to the Yamato, and you press the attack button 2 more times. And now the Doppelganger reacts to that, and he does the 3rd and 4th hit of Yamato combo A/C. And now you need to make a pause because of Aerial Rave B, right? And the Doppelganger also makes a pause. So when you resume mashing, Vergil does the roulette spin of Aerial Rave B, and the Doppelganger does the flurry of slashes of Yamato combo C. So essentially, both Vergil and the Doppelganger make the same pause. Vergil has to make this pause because of Aerial Rave B, and the Doppelganger makes this pause because he reacts to it, and he ends up using Yamato combo C instead of Yamato combo A. However, if you use the AIR TAUNT, you mash during the AIR TAUNT, and there is no pause. So Vergil's Doppelganger ends up using Yamato combo A and not C. So that's essentially what happens if you don't use the AIR TAUNT. So you press the attack button twice during Starfall, and 2 more times after Trick Up when you use Aerial Rave B. The Doppelganger is like, oh, he pressed the attack button 4 times. I'm going to use the first 4 hits of Yamato combo C. Oh, he made a pause now. I'm going to wait. And then when I resume mashing, he also resumes mashing, and he does the flurry of slashes. Alright, so you might be wondering, but why do you switch to the Yamato while using the AIR TAUNT? It's because if you want to use the S-Rank AIR TAUNT, you have to switch either to the Yamato or the Mirage Edge. Using the S-Rank AIR TAUNT with Beowulf equipped is not possible. However, in the original combo, that is exactly what I did. But how did I do it? I did it by using the Chi Trainer, which enables me to use the S-Rank AIR TAUNT regardless of which weapon I have equipped. But this is not possible. You're not going to be able to do this if you have Beowulf equipped. If you have Beowulf equipped, you're going to use the regular AIR TAUNT, and then the combo fails. So you gotta switch to the Yamato. In this analysis that you're seeing right now, I've basically proven that I can do this setup, this entire combo, even by switching to the Yamato, but it's just extra inputs in this already insane setup, right? And one other thing you might be curious about is, why do you switch to Beowulf while using Rising Star? And why do you let go of the lock-on while using Starfall? It's very simple. The reason I switched to Beowulf while using Rising Star is so that I wouldn't have to switch to it later when I'm already busy with 5 billion inputs where I have to tackle 70 things at once. So this is why you gotta switch to Beowulf while using Rising Star. It's easy. It's really easy. Now, why do I let go of the lock-on? It's also very simple. Trick Up requires you to let go of the lock-on. So you want to let go of the lock-on prematurely. You don't want to, like, if you stay locked on and you press the trick button, Vergil will use Air Trick instead of Trick Up. Alright? So let's go over this setup again. This is the hard way, okay? So, of course, you keep holding the Storm Blades throughout all of this. Alright, you keep holding the Mirage Blade button until the very end. So, you use Rising Star. While using Rising Star, you switch to Beowulf. You let go of the lock-on. Now, you press the attack button like 4 times. Vergil uses Starfall. Now, you use Trick Up. You lock on again. And you switch to the Yamato. And you use the AIR TAUNT. Now, you continue mashing like a maniac. And you use Aerial Rave B. the Doppelganger will use Yamato combo A, and when Vergil does the final hit of Aerial Rave B to pin the enemy to the ground, the Doppelganger will catch the enemy with Yamato combo A. Now you use Trig down, now you let go of the Storm Blades, Judgment Cut End, and one Mirage Blade. Alright, this is the hard way. Let me show you the easy way to do this combo. Alright, so this is an alternative way that I came up with like a week or a few weeks after doing this combo perfectly. So, the same thing applies. You keep holding the Mirage Blade button, you keep holding the Storm Blades, and now you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger and you use Rising Star. And you release the lock-on and you switch to Beowulf, just like before. The only difference here is you mash the attack button 2 to 3 times before you're done with Rising Star. And now, you use Starfall, and you keep mashing while using Starfall. Now you use Trick Up, you lock on, you switch to the Yamato, and you use Aerial Rave B. And now, you just mash, Vergil does Aerial Rave B, pins the enemy to the ground, the Doppelganger catches them, and it's all the same. So what is the difference here? The difference is, in the first setup, in the first method, you only start mashing the attack button after Vergil is done with Rising Star, right? So this is why you have to use the AIR TAUNT in the first place. However, if you start mashing the attack button while using Rising Star, the Doppelganger will start using Yamato combo A earlier, and then there's no reason for you to use any AIR TAUNT, right? I hope you're following. So, essentially, you press right and you hold the attack button, Vergil uses Rising Star, you release the lock-on while using Rising Star, you switch to Beowulf while using Rising Star, and you mash the attack button 2 to 3 times. Now, you use Starfall, which is just mashing, and while using Starfall, you keep mashing. Now, you use Trick Up, because you've already let go of the lock-on, so you just press the Trig button, and now you switch to the Yamato, and you use Aerial Rave B. So you're just mashing like a maniac, and this is it. This is literally the whole thing. This is the definitive way to do this setup, essentially. I highly recommend this. Alright, so now we gotta talk about all of the issues you can experience and all the mistakes you can make during this combo. And oh boy, is there a lot. Oh my lord, especially for the last part. So, anyway, let's go. So, the first thing can happen is you can end up using Starfall way too early. If this happens, you'll get this reverse knockback. So the enemy will be blown away in the opposite direction, and you don't want that. I mean, listen, the combo can work even like this. It really makes no difference whatsoever. So maybe you do want that? Maybe you think it looks more stylish? This has to do with the enemy's altitude or how far away from the ground they are. At least that's how I look at it. So when you cancel the first slash of Rising Star with Air Trick, you want to wait a fraction of a millisecond before using Starfall. Otherwise, this might happen. So, yeah. Sometimes you can end up using Million Stab way too early after Helmbreaker, and you'll get this reverse Million Stab, and you don't want that, obviously. So, after using Helmbreaker, you wait just a little bit. Don't wait too long or the enemy will fall to the ground, but wait a little bit and then use Million Stab. If you don't, this will happen. So these are the mistakes you can make during this first setup. Like, not a lot of mistakes, really. This is like, these aren't really issues, they're just mistakes, so you gotta watch out. But now we can start with the actual first setup, the Doppelganger setup, and all the mistakes you can make with this setup. So the first thing can happen, and I don't think this is in any particular order, but basically one thing can happen is the Doppelganger will jump instead of continuing Yamato Combo A. So while using Yamato Combo A, he jumps, and when you start mashing, or well, when you continue mashing, he uses Aerial Rave 1 in the air. Now, why does this happen? Why does the Doppelganger jump? Well, the reason is you use enemy step, which requires you to jump. So jump canceling Helmbreaker, you press the attack button and then you jump. And because the Doppelganger reacts to your commands, sometimes he will also jump, alright? And he will completely destroy his Yamato Combo A streak, if you know what I mean. Now, I don't know what this depends on, because usually it doesn't happen, or at least it shouldn't happen, so maybe this happens because I pressed jump, I pressed space multiple times, or maybe it has to do with the timing. Maybe there's a point during which you cannot press jump. Maybe, I really couldn't tell you, but this is something that happened quite a lot. I'm not going to say it's the most frequent mistake, but it's definitely something that can happen. Like, the Doppelganger just jumps, and then he uses Aerial Rave. These are all different examples. And this is a similar issue. So here, the Doppelganger ends up using Rapid Slash instead of continuing Yamato Combo A. Now, why does this happen? It's very simple. After using enemy step to jump cancel Helmbreaker, you gotta use Air Stinger, which is right plus attack button. Vergil is on the left side in midair with the Mirage Edge, and when you press right plus attack button with the Mirage Edge in the air, when you're on the left side, that is Air Stinger. But the Doppelganger is on the left side, on the ground, and he can only use the Yamato. He can't use the Mirage Edge. So when you're on the left side on the ground, and you press right plus attack button with the Yamato, that is Rapid Slash. And the Doppelganger reacts to you pressing right plus attack button to use Air Stinger, and he responds in kind by using Rapid Slash. So basically, this is just the Doppelganger reacting to you pressing right plus attack button to use Air Stinger. Now, again, just like with the previous issue with, like the Doppelganger jumping, I don't know why this happens sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. It's not the most frequent mistake, and once again, I think it has to do with, like, when you input Air Stinger, when you press right plus attack button. I don't know, though. I really don't know, but it's something can happen. This is another mistake that is sometimes very frequent, but sometimes it's not. So, the Doppelganger ends up using Yamato Combo B instead of Yamato Combo A. Now, as you guys already know, Yamato Combo B is attack button, pause, attack button. So after the first 2 hits, you make a pause, right? Whereas Yamato Combo A is just mashing like a maniac. Why I think this happens is, basically, while using Rising Star, I take too long to start mashing the attack button. So the Doppelganger starts using Yamato Combo A or B too late. So after I use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave, I have to make a pause, right? So that I can, use Helmbreaker, switch the Mirage Edge, all this. And during this pause, the Doppelganger reacts to that pause, and he uses Yamato Combo B. So the reason this happens, I think, is because I start mashing the attack button too late. You're supposed to start mashing the attack button before you're done with Rising Star. But here, I started mashing it way too late, I think. So the Doppelganger reacted to me pressing attack button, to use Aerial Rave, the first 2 hits in the air, and when I made that pause, he also made the pause, right? Because this pause is kind of required. You need to, you use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave in the air, then you have to make a pause so you can switch to the Mirage Edge, use Helmbreaker, use Enemy Step, and this pause gives the Doppelganger enough time to go, oh, so it's a pause, alright, I'm gonna make a pause too. And when you resume mashing, he will use the last hit of Yamato Combo B. But, like I said, the reason for this, I think, is because I started mashing the attack button way too late. Basically, only slightly before I was done with Rising Star. You gotta start mashing the attack button during Rising Star, alright? So that's basically how this whole thing works. However, sometimes the Doppelganger will end up using Yamato Combo C instead of Yamato Combo A. And this is like, what happens is, as you guys already know, like I said, Yamato Combo A is mashing the attack button like a maniac. But Yamato Combo C is you mash the attack button 4 to 5 times, then you make a pause, and then you continue mashing. So once again, what happens here is I mash the attack button during Rising Star, and I make that pause to switch the Mirage Edge and use Helmbreaker, and during this pause, the Doppelganger also reacts to it. He makes his own pause, and then when I resume mashing, he uses Yamato Combo C. So it's very important to know, like, you know, when you're done with the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave with Yamato, you really want to immediately switch the Mirage Edge and immediately use Helmbreaker. You don't want this pause to be way too long. Otherwise, the Doppelganger will react to that pause, and he'll either end up using Yamato Combo B, if you didn't mash enough beforehand during Rising Star, or he will end up using Yamato Combo C. Now, there's nothing wrong with this because, as you guys already know, in the Eclipse combo, we do exactly this. The Doppelganger ends up using Yamato Combo C instead of Yamato Combo A. But we wanted this to be different, or well, I wanted this to be different. I wanted the Doppelganger to use Yamato Combo A instead of Combo C. But there's nothing wrong with the Doppelganger using Yamato Combo C. The combo will still work. It's just that I didn't want the setup to be identical to the Eclipse combo. So, yeah, definitely make sure that you switch to the Mirage Edge and use Helmbreaker immediately after using the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave. And keep mashing. Don't stop mashing. If the pause you make is way too long, or even slightly longer than it should be, the Doppelganger reacts, does a different combo, and it's GG. So, yeah. And this is the most common the most common issue you can encounter during the first Doppelganger setup. And I've already been over this, we've been over this. I talked about this at length during my Eclipse combo analysis. So, no enemy step. Okay, so let me explain how this works. See, when you use Rising Star, and when you use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave, you're supposed to switch to the Mirage Edge and use Helmbreaker. And then you're supposed to enemy step. You're supposed to jump cancel this Helmbreaker, right? Now, as you guys already know, enemy step is a crucial mechanic in DMC that every character has. And the way it works is you got to be very close to your enemy. And when you can jump off your enemy. You can use them as a trampoline or something. I don't know. So that's how it works. It's very important. That is jump canceling, essentially. But here's the problem. Sometimes Rising Star, and I don't know what this depends on. Nobody knows what this depends on. Sometimes Rising Star will create this gap between Vergil and the enemy. And what happens when Rising Star creates this gap is you won't be close enough to the enemy. And as a result, when you attempt to jump cancel a Helmbreaker, when you enemy step, Vergil will not jump. He won't enemy step, right? Because the game perceives Vergil as not being close enough to the enemy. So you can mash jump. You can just mash. I keep mashing space. I'm trying so hard to enemy step, to jump cancel this Helmbreaker, but I can't. The game simply doesn't allow me to. So I end up using a normal Helmbreaker, and I end up pinning the enemy to the ground, and I end up pinning myself to the ground, if you know what I mean. So this is the most common issue you can encounter during the first part of the combo, and it is also one of the most common issues you can encounter in this combo as a whole, in general. Even though the last part of the combo is hell, this is also a significant factor. It's like one of the main reasons why I had to redo this combo over and over and over again. It's like I know that the last part of the combo is the most difficult one, and I know that I can do this first part of the combo in my sleep, but it's a gamble. 8 times out of 10, I'm not joking, 8 times out of 10, you will not be able, or at least I wasn't able, to jump cancel Helmbreaker. Even when you think you're close to the enemy, even when it doesn't appear that Rising Star created this gap between Vergil and the enemy, if you attempt to jump cancel Helmbreaker, you will still fail. I don't know why, but this was a problem during the Eclipse combo, and it's the same thing now for this combo, because it's essentially the same setup, right? I don't know what to say. This is the main reason why this setup is so difficult. It is not that difficult input-wise if you're an experienced Vergil player, but it has this issue that drives you crazy. So, yeah. Now, this is a fun one. So, I don't know if you guys know this. I did mention this during my Vergil guide, but if the Doppelganger is too far away from Vergil, or rather, if Vergil is too far away from the Doppelganger will automatically go back to Vergil's position, regardless of where he was, right? So, in this case, and this has happened a handful of times, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to go as far as to say that it was frequent, but sometimes the Doppelganger will automatically go back to your position because you're too far away from him. So after you use Air Stinger to gain distance away from the enemy, you use Starfall to gain even more distance away from the enemy, and now that you're supposed to use Void Slash, the Doppelganger goes back to Vergil's position. So this is a distance thing, but you cannot control it. There is no way. It's RNG. It's random. Sometimes the game just thinks that you gained way too much distance away from the Doppelganger and the enemy. Luckily, this is not a common mistake. I keep calling it a mistake. It's an issue, because you cannot affect this in any way. At least not to my knowledge. Sometimes Void Slash doesn't connect. Either because, I don't know, I used it too early, or maybe there's some other reason that I don't know of. But the way I see it, it doesn't have to do with timing. It's not about me using Void Slash too early or too late. The reason this happens, the way I see it, is the Doppelganger just blows the enemy away in a completely different direction. And I can't even catch the enemy with Void Slash because it's impossible, right? The enemy flies past Vergil. It's not in the same line, if you know what I mean. This was even more common during the Eclipse combo with Yamato combo C. I went over that in my Eclipse combo analysis. With Yamato combo A, it is way more consistent, and this issue does not happen that frequently at all. That is one of the main reasons why I wanted to use Yamato combo A instead of Yamato combo C. Another big reason as to why I decided to have the Doppelganger use Yamato combo A instead of Yamato combo C is when the Doppelganger uses Yamato combo C, 99.9% of the time, when you catch the enemy with Void Slash, the enemy will kind of be on the ground, as you can see here. So every single time I attempted the Eclipse combo and had the Doppelganger use Yamato combo C, I would end up catching the enemy with Void Slash, but they would be on the ground. With Yamato combo A, it's almost guaranteed 100% of the time, when you catch the enemy with Void Slash, they will be in midair, clearly airborne. Another thing can happen is sometimes Vergil uses the first hit of Yamato combo A instead of using Void Slash. Now, Void Slash is back plus forward plus attack button, but even though I am pressing back plus forward plus attack button, Vergil ends up using one hit with the Yamato. It registers me only pressing the attack button, not back plus forward. I assume that this is a camera thing. This must be a camera issue. Another thing can happen, which is arguably even more annoying, is Vergil ends up using Rapid Slash instead of Void Slash. Now, Rapid Slash is forward plus attack button. Void Slash is back plus forward plus attack button. So the game doesn't register me pressing back. It only registers me pressing forward plus attack button, right? There is one possible reason for this. Maybe, just maybe, I press back too early. Because, you know, after using Starfall and switching to the Yamato, Starfall has these recovery frames. So maybe I pressed back plus forward. Maybe I pressed back too early. Maybe I should have waited a fraction of a millisecond and then pressed back plus forward plus attack button. Because that's the only reason I see for this to happen. Like, I think this is the main reason. Maybe I input Void Slash way too early, right? Like, before I even... Just as I hit the ground, that millisecond, that one frame. I guess you're supposed to wait a little. So, yeah. And these are basically all of the issues that I've experienced during the first part of the combo. It is by no means easy. It is very RNG. There are so many things can happen. So many things can go south. And I just don't like... I love this setup, the way it looks, but it is not a consistent setup. It just isn't. So, yeah. Now let's move on to the second part of the combo. So the second part of the combo is by far the easiest part of the combo, not counting the first setup, the one where, you know, you don't even use the Doppelganger. That still falls under the first part. But this is by far the easiest Doppelganger setup, but it doesn't come without its own share of issues. So let's go over them. One thing can happen, and I cannot for the life of me explain why this happens, is... Vergil uses Helmbreaker instead of Air Stinger. Helmbreaker is just pressing the attack button once in midair. Air Stinger is left plus attack button. You gotta believe me, I am pressing left plus attack button here. But the game says no, you're only pressing the attack button. I would assume that this probably has to do with the camera. Like, the game somehow doesn't see Vergil as being on the right or something. I really couldn't tell you, but it is beyond annoying, and it happened quite a few times. Sometimes the Doppelganger uses Aerial Rave A instead of Aerial Rave B. So as you already know, Aerial Rave A is mashing the attack button like a maniac in the air. But Aerial Rave B is you press the attack button twice, and then you make a pause, and then you continue to mash. So what happens here, essentially, is when I use Air Stinger, the Doppelganger uses the first two hits of Aerial Rave B, and now I switch to Beowulf, I make a pause, and I try to use Starfall, but apparently the pause I made wasn't long enough. I used Starfall too early, the pause was a few frames too short, and the Doppelganger ended up, you know, when I pressed the attack button and used Starfall, he was like, oh, so let me just continue with the last hit of Aerial Rave A instead of using Aerial Rave B. So I guess this is on me, but I cannot delineate, I cannot verbalize how subtle this is. I could have sworn the pause was long enough, but the game says no, it's not. So after using Air Stinger, you switch to Beowulf, and just before you're about to use Starfall, you know, to press the attack button, make sure the pause you make is long enough. Please. You don't want this to happen, because it's on you. Sometimes, however, the Doppelganger will only use one hit of Aerial Rave instead of two. Now, you gotta believe me, I know you can't see my inputs here, but I am pressing the attack button twice while using Air Stinger. I pressed the attack button twice, maybe even thrice. Yet the Doppelganger only uses one hit of Aerial Rave. The game registers me pressing the attack button only once, not twice or thrice. I don't know why. I know for a fact that I was mashing the attack button. I pressed it like 2 to 3 times. But, oh well. Sometimes I'll end up using Air Trick instead of Trig Down. And this, I believe, is a camera thing. So, Trig Down, when you're on the left side, is left plus right plus Trig button. Or in my case, A plus D plus E, right? And I clearly press all these buttons. An Air Trick is just locking on and pressing the Trig button. It's that easy. So the game, for whatever reason, didn't register me pressing all these buttons. Like, you lock on, you press A plus D plus E, left plus right plus trig button. No, it says you only press the trig button. And this is almost a given. This is a camera issue. I am so tired of this game and its camera issues. It's insane. But, oh well, that's definitely something can happen. But these are mostly just bullshit issues. The actual mistakes that you can make, and there are two of them. During this part of the combo, during this setup, first one is you can end up using trig down way too early. So you essentially end up canceling Starfall with trig down way too early. And what does that mean? What happens as a result? What happens is, if you cancel Starfall but using trig down too early, you will be too far away from the enemy. So when you try to use Rising Dragon, it won't connect because you are too far away from the enemy. That means that you essentially canceled Starfall, this flying kick, before you were even close to hitting the ground, right? And this is something can definitely happen. It is the most frequent mistake that you can make during this part of the combo. So you cancel Starfall with trig down way too early, and Rising Dragon doesn't connect. However, conversely, you can do the complete opposite. So you can end up canceling Starfall way too late. Now, what happens as a result of that? This means that you canceled Starfall so late that you were like 1 millimeter away from the ground before you canceled it. You don't want to be that close to the ground before you use trig down to cancel Starfall. You also don't want to be too... You don't want to do it too early, like before. But what happens if you do it too late? What happens is you will now be on the right side. So the enemy will be to your left. So when you press left plus attack button to try to use Rising Dragon, you'll end up using Lunar Phase instead. Because when you're on the left side with Beowulf and you press left plus attack button and you hold it, that is Rising Dragon. But if you're on the right side and you press left plus attack button and you hold it, that is Lunar Phase. And since the enemy is now to your left, when you press left plus attack button, you will end up using Lunar Phase. So the two of the biggest issues you can make during this setup is canceling Starfall with trig down way too early or canceling it way too late. It's like pick your poison. Whichever of these you make, it's gonna be a disaster and the combo fails. So you need to have perfect timing. You need to know exactly when to cancel Starfall. But believe me, it is pretty easy. However, that's not where our issues end with this setup. So sometimes, even after you've done Rising Dragon, you use trig down, and you want to use, Void Slash with the Yamato, instead of using Void Slash, which is back plus forward plus attack button, Vergil ends up using just one hit with the Yamato. So he doesn't, once again, the game doesn't register you pressing back plus forward. Again, most likely a camera thing. I'm calling it right now. This game is just... Oh, and you can also end up using Void Slash way too early, and you'll end up not catching the enemy. So that's not good, obviously. This has happened a few times, I'm not gonna lie, and it's the most frustrating thing ever. Imagine getting this far, and then this happens during the easiest part of the combo. Wow. But also, you could end up doing the complete opposite, which is using Void Slash too late. Which, I mean... This isn't as bad as using it too early, because if you use it too early, the combo completely fails. If you use it too late, you will end up catching the enemy with it, but, it's not very aesthetically pleasing. At least not to me. Because the enemy is technically on the ground, they're not airborne, and the name of the game is keeping the enemy airborne like 24/7. So yeah, this is these are all the issues you can experience, or well, all the issues that I experienced during the second part of the combo. And now we're finally getting to the worst part of this combo. Right, so the first thing can happen, and I mean, I guess this is out of order, but like I said, you can end up using the normal AIR TAUNT instead of the S-rank AIR TAUNT, and this happens if you don't switch to the Yamato after using Starfall and Trick Up. So you let go of the lock-on, you use Starfall, you use Trick Up, you lock on, you switch to the Yamato, and you use the AIR TAUNT, the S-rank AIR TAUNT. Like I said, the only way to use the S-rank AIR TAUNT is if you have the Yamato equipped, or if you have the Mirage Edge equipped. But here, I had Beowulf equipped. I didn't switch to the Yamato fast enough, so when I used the AIR TAUNT, I ended up using the normal AIR TAUNT, right? So this is why I had the trainer active, because if you have the trainer active, you can use the S-rank AIR TAUNT regardless of which weapon you have equipped, which means that even with Beowulf, you can use the S-rank AIR TAUNT without having to switch to the Yamato, because you already have so many things that you gotta press here. You gotta, like I said, you literally let go of the lock-on, you use Starfall, and you keep mashing during all of this. Then, you use Trick Up, you lock on again, this is mandatory, you switch to the Yamato, and you use the S-rank AIR TAUNT, and during all of this, you keep mashing, right? A lot of inputs, a lot of things, and this can definitely happen, so I advise against using this AIR TAUNT method, and I advise you to use the other method that does not require the AIR TAUNT. Another issue is no Trick Up. So, you gotta believe me, I am mashing the trig button. I let go of the lock-on and I'm mashing the trig button, but no. The game does not register me mashing the trig button to use Trick Up, and Vergil ends up not canceling Starfall. And he just ends up doing the whole thing. He ends up doing Starfall without any interruptions. I don't know why, but whatever. Sometimes I'll end up using Air Trick instead of Trick Up. Now, as you guys already know, Air Trick is you lock on and you press the trig button. But Trick Up is you let go of the lock on and you press the trig button. This is why it's so important to let go of the lock on literally as soon as you start Starfall. Right? Because if you don't let go of the lock-on immediately, this can happen. You know, when you press E, or well, the trig button, you'll end up using the air trick, because that's like lock-on plus trig button. So let go of the lock-on, and then you press the trig button to use Trick Up. Otherwise, you'll end up doing this. And the whole reason for this, the whole reason why you gotta use Trick Up, is because if you use Trick Up, let's say you have the Doppelganger active. So you use Trick Up, which is letting go of the lock-on and pressing the trig button. Vergil does Trick Up, but the Doppelganger doesn't react at all. But if you use Air Trick, which is locking on and pressing the trig button, Vergil will teleport to the enemy, and the Doppelganger will follow suit, and he will teleport with you. So if you do this, it's over, right? If you stay locked on and you press the trig button, the Doppelganger will teleport towards the enemy, and he will be in the air, so he can't use Yamato Combo A. Now, this is a mystery. Sometimes I would end up using this double Starfall, and I cannot explain why this happens to save my life. I don't know. Like, if you pay very close attention to all of these instances in which I make this mistake, or, well, experience this issue, you'll notice that I use Starfall, and then I seemingly use Trick Up, but it's like I cancel Trick Up before it even comes out. Like frame 1. It's like I cancel Trick Up with another Starfall. But I didn't think this was possible. I also humored the idea that maybe I somehow ended up using enemy step, but no, there's no reason to jump here. There's no reason to press space. So this was not an enemy step. You can see by the animation, it definitely seems that I somehow cancel Trick Up way too early by using Starfall. I don't know how, though. And sometimes the same thing will happen, but basically it's going to be in one direction. So, the same exact thing, but it's like Vergil does one Starfall, and he interrupts it with Trick Up, and then he does another Starfall in the same direction. I really, this is one of those things where I really don't even know how this is possible. I don't even know what like, because you gotta mash during this entire sequence. So, the moment you use Starfall, you gotta mash during Starfall, and then you press the trick button to use Trick Up, but apparently when you do that, you're supposed to make a pause that lasts maybe a few frames, because if you don't, this happens. I really couldn't tell you. I don't know, but whatever. Now, remember how I said how, like, after you're done with Starfall, you use Trick Up, and now it is imperative that you lock on and switch to the Yamato so that you can use the AIR TAUNT, the S-rank AIR TAUNT. Why is it so important to lock on? Because if you don't lock on, what's going to happen is you will use a reverse S-rank AIR TAUNT. And because of this, the enemy will not be kept airborne. They will eventually fall to the ground. So, like I said, you let go of the lock-on even before you start Starfall, so that you would later be able to use Trick Up, because Trick Up requires you to let go of the lock-on. If you don't let go of the lock-on, you'll end up making that other mistake that I made, where I used Air Trick, which is lock-on plus trick button. So you let go of the lock-on, but immediately after you're done with Starfall and Trick Up, you lock on again to use the AIR TAUNT, because if you don't lock on again, you're cooked. This will happen, and you don't want that. Sometimes, though, there was this one mistake that I made, one issue that I experienced, and I don't even know how. When I used Rising Star, the enemy was on a much higher altitude than Vergil. So when I ended up using Starfall, Starfall didn't even graze the enemy. Vergil literally went underneath the enemy with Starfall. And so, even after using the AIR TAUNT, the enemy, it was too late, and the enemy was already on the ground. This only happened maybe like once. I don't know how, though. I guess maybe... No, I literally have no idea how this happened. Sorry. So, yeah, maybe the enemy was too high up on the Void Slash before I even started this whole setup. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. But, yeah, very weird stuff. Peculiar, even. Sometimes I would end up using the AIR TAUNT insanely early. And I mean insanely. Look at this. I don't even see Trick Up. Like, the moment I use Starfall, I just use the S-rank AIR TAUNT. How? Like, I don't even know. Like, is it even possible to cancel something this fast? Did I even use the Trick Up? I mean, I had to use Trick Up because you gotta cancel Starfall. You can't just use Starfall and then use the S-rank AIR TAUNT. You gotta use Trick Up. But I didn't expect... Wow, I cannot believe the Trick Up is so easy to cancel. With Starfall, with AIR TAUNTs, it's insane. And now we have the 5 Trick Up AIR TAUNT cancel issues. That's the only way I can call them. So, I don't think these are in any order, but let's start with the first one. So sometimes, after using Starfall, I will use Trick Up way too late, I guess, and I would cancel it with the AIR TAUNT way too early. So as you can see, I use Starfall, and I'm already close to hitting the ground, and only now do I use Trick Up, but I cancel Trick Up with the AIR TAUNT way too early, so I don't gain a lot of altitude, and obviously this has no effect on the enemy, and the enemy falls to the ground. You can see this same thing here in all of these instances. These are just some of the recorded instances that I cherry-picked, if you will. So it's the same exact thing. Starfall, I cancel it way too late. Use Trick Up, and, this is basically what happens. I am not high up enough. I am not close enough to the enemy. I am too low. My altitude is too low. My distance is too high. I'm too far away from the enemy. So This is just something can happen. Sometimes, however, I will use Starfall and I will cancel it immediately, so I won't wait for Vergil to almost hit the ground. I will cancel it immediately, but I will also cancel Trick Up way too early with the Air Taunt. So in this case, I cancel Starfall really early, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself, but I also cancel Trick Up way too early, and I use the Air Taunt way too early. As a result, Vergil is much lower than the enemy. The enemy is on a higher altitude, so now I can't properly hit the enemy. This happened a lot. And, well, yeah, I mean, in these examples, I'm kind of close to the enemy, but I'm way too low. They're higher than me, so yeah. Sometimes, however, you can end up canceling Starfall in time with Trick Up. You will cancel Trick Up almost in time with the Air Taunt, but you will still not be close enough to the enemy. So when you use Aerial Rave B, it won't connect. And this has happened a handful of times. And it's like, you know, I think that what happens here actually is I don't cancel Starfall properly. I think I cancel it too late. But I cancel Trick Up in time with the Air Taunt. You can see how the altitude is not a problem here. Vergil is on the same altitude as the enemy, give or take. The problem is the distance. The hits of Aerial Rave, the slashes, are not able to make contact with the enemy. And I suspect that this is because I canceled Starfall way too late. I canceled Starfall just before hitting the ground, which made Vergil gain too much distance away from the enemy. However, I let Trick Up play out, the animation played out, I gained a lot of altitude, and I used the Air Taunt in time. So here, I canceled Trick Up in time, but I canceled Starfall with Trick Up way too late. At least that's how I see it. Wow, this is just like, how many things can go wrong in just one setup? All of these are nuances. They are all timing intensive, like timing related things. It is so insane. It is insane. Sometimes, like I said, the last hit of Aerial Rave B will simply disconnect, and it won't work. Now, even if you want to use the other version, the easier version of the setup that doesn't require you to use any Air Taunt, it doesn't come without its own set of issues. So, let's say you want to use the alternative version that doesn't require any Air Taunt. Okay, so use Rising Star, use Starfall, and now you use Trick Up to cancel Starfall, and you will be on the same altitude as the enemy. However, you are still too far away, and you cannot connect Aerial Rave B. However, in this example, even though I am too far away from the enemy, and even though I literally cannot touch them with Aerial Rave B, the Doppelganger ends up hitting them with Yamato Combo A. So in a weird way, the combo ends up working, but of course it doesn't end up working because I'm not insane to accept this. Like, you know, it's not aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't work. So what happens here, again, is I canceled Starfall too late with Trick Up. I canceled it way too late. So I was almost close to hitting the ground when I canceled Starfall with Trick Up. And as a result, I ended up gaining way too much distance away from the enemy, even though I was on the same altitude as the enemy. So it's like, pick your poison. Either you will cancel Starfall too late with Trick Up, which will cause you to gain a lot of distance, or you will end up canceling Trick Up too early with the Air Taunt, which will cause you to not gain enough altitude. Either way, you're not touching the enemy, either because you're too far away from them, so a distance issue, or because they're too, like, you're too far beneath them, so it's an altitude issue, right? And let's not also include all the other possibilities, so yeah. But wait, there's more. So here you have this. I cancel Starfall perfectly with Trick Up. Not just like I didn't wait for Vergil to almost hit the ground. I cancel Starfall with Trick Up perfectly. So, and I also use the Air Taunt perfectly to cancel Trick Up. I am at the perfect distance and the perfect altitude. I am, as a matter of fact, I'm almost higher up in the air than the enemy, and I'm very close to them. I'm about to do this combo perfectly. However, when I start using Aerial Rave, the Doppelganger uses Yamato Combo B instead of Yamato Combo A. Now, why does this happen? As you can see, in every single one, literally every single one of these instances, everything is perfect. All different attempts, by the way, all of them. Everything is perfect. My canceling game is perfect, but the Doppelganger uses Yamato Combo B instead of Yamato Combo A. Why is that? Let's find out. So it's very simple, really. See, I use Rising Star, and then I use Starfall. While using Starfall, I start pressing the attack button twice. So 1, 2, and now that I'm using the Air Taunt, I have to make a pause, right? So I'm not pressing anything. I didn't mash. You're supposed to mash. The whole point of the Air Taunt is to mash during it so that the Doppelganger can react. And Vergil doesn't react because he's taunting. So, again, what happens here is I use Starfall. While using Starfall, I press the attack button 2 to 3 times. This causes the Doppelganger to use the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo B. And now I make a pause. When I resume mashing to use Aerial Rave, I press the attack button 1 more time, and the Doppelganger is like, oh, pause is over. Boop, Yamato Combo B last hit. Because remember, Yamato Combo A is mashing like a maniac. Yamato Combo B is attack button, pause, and then you press the attack button again. And what did I do here? While using Starfall, I pressed the attack button twice, and the Doppelganger did the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo B. Then, during Trick Up, Air Taunt, I stopped mashing, I made a pause, and when I started to resume mashing, when I used Aerial Rave, the Doppelganger used the final hit of Yamato Combo B. This was my bad. You're supposed to mash like a maniac during this whole part, during the Air Taunt, during Trick Up. You never stop mashing, right? You never ever stop mashing. This is why all of this happened. Like I said, I don't think this needs any additional explanations. I pressed the attack button twice during Starfall. The Doppelganger did the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo B. During the Air Taunt Trick Up cancel, I stopped mashing, so the Doppelganger saw that pause. When I continued mashing, he did the last hit of Yamato Combo B. That is essentially what happened here. My bad for not mashing. Wow. Sometimes, however, and this is something that makes you want to pull all your hair out, I would end up using Aerial Rave A instead of Aerial Rave B. So Aerial Rave B is attack button, pause, and then you keep mashing the attack button. Whereas Aerial Rave A is mashing the attack button like a maniac without making any pause. What essentially happens in all these attempts is I press the attack button twice, and the pause I make after the second slash of Aerial Rave is not long enough. So when I resume mashing, I end up using the final hit of Aerial Rave A instead of Aerial Rave B. So the pause was not long enough here. This is on me. But I'll get back to this. You may be thinking to yourself, but why would you make such an obvious oversight? Why would you make this mistake? Are you stupid? Are you a dumbass? Yes, I am. But let me explain. I will explain later why I was so hasty. Why the pause I made wasn't long enough. It's because of the following issue. Sometimes you'll do everything perfectly. You'll cancel everything perfectly. You'll end up using the last hit of Aerial Rave B and pin the enemy to the ground, only for the Doppelganger to stop Yamato Combo A just before the last hit. So he just stops using Yamato Combo A. Essentially, he doesn't use the last hit of Yamato Combo A. Instead, he resets the combo. The way I see it, this happens because of the pause you have to make after the second hit of Aerial Rave B. If the pause you make is even a few frames too long, the Doppelganger will end up dropping Yamato combo A, and he won't use the last hit. Instead, he will reset the combo. At least that's how I see it. I think this happens because of the pause. You're not mashing fast enough. So the reason I made that previous mistake, where I would use Aerial Rave A instead of Aerial Rave B, is because I was so afraid that the pause was going to be way too long and that the Doppelganger would fail to use the final hit of Yamato combo A, that I ended up going into the other extreme. And I ended up making a pause that was way too short, and I ended up using Aerial Rave A instead of B. So if the pause is way too short, you end up using Aerial Rave A instead of B, and the combo fails. But if the pause you make is too long, the Doppelganger might end up just resetting Yamato combo A, not doing the last hit. But this could very well be a completely separate issue in and of itself. It might not have anything to do with the pause, or its length, the duration of the pause, how long or short it is. I couldn't tell you, but this has happened a billion times. All of these issues that I've just described have happened over a billion times. I am not joking, I'm not exaggerating, they are all different attempts. Everything you see here, and there are only some of the attempts that I recorded, and some of the attempts that I picked. That is how bad things are. Now, I've already been over this, kind of, so sometimes the Doppelganger will miss the final hit of Yamato combo A. He will do it, but he will miss it because the enemy is too high up in the air, and Vergil will miss the last hit of Aerial Rave B because he is too low. The enemy is on a much higher altitude. So the reason the Doppelganger fails to use the last hit of Yamato combo A is because the enemy is too high up in the air. And the reason Vergil ends up failing the last hit of Aerial Rave B is because, well, the enemy is too high up in the air. And this happens because you didn't cancel Trick Up in time, or you didn't cancel the AIR Taunt, or Starfall, one of those issues that I've already discussed. 90% of the time, it's because, you're not close enough, because the AIR Taunt, the altitude, distance, and both of these hits end up failing, or something bad happens, doesn't really matter, but, yeah. However, even if you want to use the version of the combo, the alternative version, where you don't use the AIR Taunt, the same thing can happen. In this version, I don't use the AIR Taunt at all, and it still fails. Why does it fail? Because, pay close attention, I cancel Starfall way too late. I'm almost about to hit the ground before I use Trick Up. I use Trick Up, and I'm on the right altitude. I'm on the same altitude as the enemy, but it doesn't matter because I am too far away from the enemy. As a result, the enemy is too high up in the air for the Doppelganger to hit them with Yamato combo A, and they're too far away from me to catch them with the last hit of Aerial Rave B, or any hit of Aerial Rave B. As you can see, I'm able to somewhat hit them with Aerial Rave B, but the last hit doesn't connect. Why? Because the enemy is too far away from Vergil, because I canceled Starfall with Trick Up way too late. And the reason the Doppelganger fails the last hit of Yamato combo A is because, well, the enemy is way too high up in the air. So this can happen even with the version of the combo where you don't use the AIR Taunt. However, you won't experience altitude issues. You can only experience distance issues. When you do this version of the combo where you don't use the AIR Taunt, the only mistake you can make is canceling Starfall with Trick Up way too late. So cancel Starfall with Trick Up early, and you won't have any issues. You won't have altitude problems because you don't have to use the AIR Taunt. So this is significantly easier. Now, sometimes this can happen. I only think this happened like twice. I don't know. I somehow used Yamato combo A with the Doppelganger too soon, so they did the last hit of Yamato combo A before Vergil could pin the enemy to the ground with the last hit of Aerial Rave B. Why does this happen? I think this happened because I started mashing the attack button like a maniac. I started mashing it before as soon as I started Rising Star. You're supposed to start mashing, if you want to use the no air taunt alternative, you're supposed to mash the attack button like a few times before you're done with Rising Star. Like during the last 2 slashes. But I was literally mashing the attack button. I started mashing so early before almost as soon as I started Rising Star. As a result, the Doppelganger ended up using Yamato Combo A before anything. Yeah, that can also happen. Oh, and of course, you can end up releasing the Storm Blades way too early. Now, this in and of itself is not an issue. But I have insane OCD when it comes to DMC combos, and I was just not content with, well, this. You know, like you barely see the enemy fly away. You just see them, whoop, immediately after the Doppelganger does the last hit of Yamato Combo A, you see them launch into the air. No, I don't like that. I made a lot of attempts that were perfect, but this was an issue. So, yeah. Sometimes I would end up using Helmbreaker or Starfall instead of Yamato Aerial Rave B. Why does this happen? It's very simple. Instead of switching to the Yamato during the air taunt, I end up switching to the Mirage Edge, or I end up switching to Beowulf for reasons that I cannot comprehend. These were on me, and these are some of those attempts where you're like, oh wow, I want to end everything, basically. So, yeah, that's on me. Sometimes the Doppelganger will end up using Yamato Combo C instead of Yamato Combo A, and this can work perfectly. As a matter of fact, I use this exact setup in the Nocturnal combo. I'm not going to analyze this here, alright? I'm not going to analyze it here, but it can be perfectly functional, alright? Just a heads up, this can happen. This can happen. Why does this happen? This happens during the no air taunt alternative. This is one of the issues you can experience if you want to do the no air taunt version of this combo. So why does this happen? This happens for one reason. So I essentially end up, you're supposed to mash the attack button before you're done with Rising Star. Not too early, because you saw what happened when I was too early. The Doppelganger ended up finishing Yamato Combo A before I could use Aerial Rave B. But here, the mistake that I made here was I am not mashing. I'm done with Rising Star. And now, only when I start Starfall do I start mashing. I press the attack button 2 times, and then I press it 2 more times to use the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B. So, what does the Doppelganger do? When I press the attack button twice during Starfall, he does the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo C. Then, when I press the attack button 2 more times to use the 2 hits of Aerial Rave B, he does the 3rd and 4th hit of Yamato Combo C. And now, I make a pause. And then I use the 3rd hit, the roulette spin of Aerial Rave B. The Doppelganger reacts to this pause, and he starts mashing. Because Yamato Combo A is mashing like a maniac. Yamato Combo C is, you press the attack button 4 times, and then you make a pause, and then you continue mashing. And Vergil does the slash flurry with Yamato Combo C. This is exactly what happens with the Doppelganger, essentially. So what I did was, when using Starfall, I pressed the attack button twice, and he ended up using the first 2 hits of Yamato Combo C. Then I used the first 2 hits of Aerial Rave B, and he reacts to those 2 hits, and he does the third and 4th hit of Yamato Combo C. And now I make a pause. During this pause, the Doppelganger also reacts, and he makes this pause. When I continue Aerial Rave B, he does Yamato Combo C. He does the slash barrage. So what was the problem here? The problem here was I started mashing the attack button way too late. If you want to do the no air taunt alternative, you're supposed to mash the attack button before you're done with Rising Star. That's very important. If you start mashing the attack button only after you're done with the Rising Star, during Starfall, the Doppelganger will end up using Yamato Combo C because of the mandatory pause that is required for Aerial Rave B. I hope you understand this. But if you want to do this deliberately, you can. And this is exactly what I did with the Nocturnal combo. However, this version with Yamato Combo C, the alternative, it doesn't come without its own issue, and that main issue is sometimes the final hit of Yamato Combo C will disconnect and it will not hit the enemy. So this will happen. And this is the most frequent mistake that you can make with this version. But I'll leave this for the Nocturnal combo analysis. It's an altitude issue. But basically, the enemy is too high up in the air, so when the Doppelganger catches them with the slash barrage, they fail to blow them away. This is incredibly common. It happens so frequently with the Nocturnal combo, but this is the Amethyst combo, and it's already got its own issues, so we're not going to talk about this. Sometimes the camera will go absolutely insane. Absolutely bonkers, man. Absolutely insane. And I like, when this happens, you can't do anything. There is nothing you can do. Like, look at this. What am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to use Judgment Cut End when I don't even see where the enemy is? And what is what? These are all different attempts, by the way. There were over 50 of these. Imagine getting to the end of the combo, and then this happens. And you're like, what the fuck? What? What am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to continue the combo? And this is all because the Doppelganger, when he uses the last hit of Yamato Combo A, he blows the enemy away in a completely random direction. It is insane. And now we finally have the final issue that you can experience. The Shmuashmite inducing one. Vergil ends up using Air Trick instead of Judgment Cut End. This is an issue that I've complained about for years, for like in at least 10 of my combo analyses. This is a mistake. This is something can happen. This is an issue this game has. I am almost 1,000,000,000% sure it's a camera issue. Or somehow an altitude or distance issue, I really couldn't tell you, where when you try to use an ultimate attack, like Judgment Cut End, or Hell on Earth, or Deep Stinger, instead of using this move, the game uses Air Trick. Now, again, Judgment Cut End is you lock on, you press forward, you press the trig button, and you press the attack button. In my case, I press Shift to lock on, W, which is forward, E, which is the trig button, and my left mouse button, which is the attack button, the melee button. Despite pressing this, the game does Air Trick, which is lock on plus trig button, or in my case, Shift plus E. So the game only registers me pressing lock on plus trig button. It doesn't register me pressing forward, and it doesn't register me pressing the attack button. And, yeah, you know those copy pastas and everything, like me wanting to cry and everything? It was because of this. I was close to giving up on this combo. Completely. I was just gonna give up. Imagine, this combo, we've been over, like, I think it has over 100 issues. They're all very frequent. Imagine surmounting all of it. You surmount every obstacle. You defy all of the odds. You're one frame away from greatness. And the game says, nah, Chief, you ain't doing this. I even uploaded a failed attempt titled No, basically, where I think you can feel my pain. Like, this has happened not once, not twice, but at least 15 times? Bro, please. There is no person in the universe who is not a DMC player who can sympathize with me here. You don't understand. You don't understand the pain, the suffering, the agony, the anguish, the bro, even now, months later, just thinking about this, it makes me lose my voice. It makes me lose my mind. You get to the end of the combo, and it fails because the game has a shitty camera, or I don't even know what. Do you have any idea how many times this has happened? Okay, you know what? I'm done yapping. I will leave you with this compilation of perfect or semi-perfect attempts, because after I was done with the combo, I made at least over 15 perfect attempts. But something was a little odd, like the camera, the angles. After I was able to prove to myself that I could do the combo, I was like, no, my OCD is making me, I need to make it even more perfect. I gotta make it a work of art. So I will leave you with this compilation of some of the recorded attempts that I, compiled, essentially, that weren't attempts, they were perfect. They were just perfect attempts. So I can't even talk, man. Definitely one of the most difficult combos I've ever done. And the next three, four combos are just as difficult. So, yeah. See ya and peace out.
Now you. You shall die. Get lost. Now you You shall die. Now you. You shall die. Get lost. Now you You shall die. What you see? Ready.